For this video, I've got this interesting LMB steam engine here. It's an On3 instead of HO scale. This was sent to me to have some remotoring work done. So, I mean, you can see there are a couple of loose brass pieces, but I wasn't asked to do any repairs with that because the owner of this model, he's doing some custom work anyway, so the only thing he wants done is to have the remotoring, which I think this originally had an open frame motor in the cab, or maybe it was a large can motor, I'm not sure, but it was probably open frame. But if possible, he wants me to put a motor inside of the back of the boiler here so that he can also add some backhead detail later on. So start off, I've got a couple motors here that he sent along, so we'll see if those fit, and if they don't, I'll ask him about maybe a different motor option. I should be able to find a good one for it, but yeah, anyway, I'll see if these fit first. So I just have to get this apart, and it looks like it only has a couple screws holding it together right now. I'm guessing he still has the rest of them on hand, or of course if he doesn't, these are easy enough to replace. Okay, looks like it just had those two holding it together. Then I have to slide this forward or off somehow. Let's see, how does this go together? There it goes. Okay. So here's what we've got for the chassis. So you can see that it is a pretty tight space to work with, so he actually wasn't even sure if it was possible to add a motor in this space, but I think it will be. See, first I want to look inside the boiler and see if it's even possible to make one of these motors fit, because they're pretty large. Let's see. Yeah, it is a pretty tight space there. Now the inside width of the boiler, it looks like inside of it, it would be wide enough to have one of those motors, but that would involve cutting out pretty much the whole bottom area, maybe up to about here, in order to fit one of those. So yeah, I mean, I'll look a little more at it, but I'm thinking it would be better to use a motor that's a bit thinner here, maybe even one that can fit into this space here, just to simplify it as much as possible. And I do know of some high torque options that would work really well here, so yeah, I'll look at this a little more and see what I can figure out. Okay, so after giving it some examination, it looks like I don't have to cut as far into the boiler as I thought in order to get either of these motors in here. And it looks like the silver kind of square one here will be the easier fit just because of its size. So yeah, for either motor, I should only have to cut up to about here. So it'll still be below the walkway and within kind of that skirting there that you see. So for the most part, that will remain hidden. And as for the rest of it, see, so from the look of it, for this motor, it'll extend about like this into the cab. So basically it would come back to about the door here. And if the owner wants to add like a backhead inside, it would end up being kind of a large one that surrounds it. Sort of like, it would probably end up looking a little like those old Mantua Tyco 480 steam engines, if you've seen those before. So yeah, that's one option anyway. And then the other little issue here, so either way I'm going to have to, like pretty much no matter what I do, I'm going to have to remove this part of the motor mount that held onto the original motor, just to get that out of the way. But I'm also going to have to remove some of this structure here, which makes it rigid and helps it to support itself on top of the whole front drive wheel truck there. So yeah, I don't want to cause too much of a problem with the structure of the thing. So yeah, before I move any further, I think I'm gonna ask a little about that and see exactly what he wants me to do. And I'm also gonna look into just another one or two motor options for him, just so that we can get the best work done here. So after some discussion, we decided those large motors were going to be a little too much for this with the way they were going to fit. I mean, I could have gotten one in there, it just probably wouldn't have been quite the best option. So after some searching around, I found this Coreless motor here. It's a 13 by 31 millimeters, so I'll still have to do a little bit of work here to make it fit just right, but it'll be much less than either of those large motors. And it also has, I've used one or two of these motors before, and they have more torque than those similarly sized can motors. So yeah, this should be a really good fit for here. I think I'll be able to fit it maybe right about there, so it'll stick out below there a little bit, get the shaft pretty close to there. Just have to figure out the universal coupling, but I already have some ideas for that, and then just some modification here too to make sure that all fits. But yeah, I think this is going to be a good option for the steam engine, so we'll get to work on it. I'll see how that turns out. Okay, so I've got the frame removed from the rest of the chassis here just so that I can look things over more, figure out what to do with it. And I think the main thing that I need to do here is just file out kind of the rest of the bottom area here so that it's kind of a cleaner pass through. And then since the motor is basically the same width as this, I'll be able to more easily bend the sides out just enough to fit the motor inside. And from that point, I think what I can do is 3D print a couple of blocks, one to fit at each end, as motor supports. And I think that'll keep everything where it needs to go. So I'll get started on that. Yeah, I think this is going to work out just fine. Just have to do a little bit of bending around there like I mentioned before so that the motor has a proper fit. And I'll do something about this back motor bracket, which is no longer needed. And while working on that, I found that the solder joints here were barely even tacked in place. Of course, there are a couple screws to hold that on too, but I'll also redo the solder joints and even strengthen them a little while I'm at it. There we go, that looks a lot better. So now, put that onto there, and I should be able to align the motor in a pretty good spot. Of course, it's still a tight fit. I'll have to make further adjustments. But yeah, the motor can go right about here from the look of it. That should be a good enough angle and fit in place. And then I just have to figure out the coupling for there and then the mounting block for the motor to keep it in the correct position on there. So for the mounting block, well, after I do a little more bending on this just to make a better fit, I'll get to the 3D modeling program and see about making something up for that. Got a couple motor mounting blocks started printing. So there will be one for the front and one for the back of the motor. And everything should fit, but we'll of course see how that all comes out when the print is finished. Alright, I've got those blocks printed out and test fit them in place, and you can see that it's pretty close but not quite there. That's the angle that I want the motor to be at, but you can see that kind of lifts this one a little and this one doesn't quite sit straight, so I'll make some adjustments and print out another couple blocks. We'll see how that works. Okay, I've got a couple new blocks printed, and since I've got the angle pretty well figured out, I went ahead and added a little bit of extra structural support to them so that they hold around the motor and keep it in place better. And they're also just a little bit thicker too, so that should be helpful there. You can see there's a little bit of lower support for the motor. Might have to file a little bit of that away. Maybe not, and it kind of adds that little bit of resistance to the movement, but well, that might actually be fine. But anyway, you can see that the motor shaft comes down like that now, which should be enough for me to get a universal with some flex tubing at one end connected to the worm, so I'll get that together and we'll see how it works. Okay, the alignment turned out to be just fine. So I've made the universal, which you can see there. It is a 3D printed part. Turned out pretty well. Put a little steel shaft in the back there and shortened the motor shaft a little bit so that everything would fit fine. Used a piece of flexible tubing. That's all working. And while I was at it, I also 3D printed a new bolster for the rear truck, something that was a little more solidly mounted in there. So it's got a screw going into it. I think that'll improve the stability of the model, since this piece here and then a little piece of brass were just kind of floating on there before. So anyway, seems to be running pretty well. I don't have any track that I can put this on since the gauging is larger than HO, but of course smaller than O. So best I can do is just run it on the table here. But anyway, you can see that that's running really nicely. It's smooth. It's pretty quiet. And the speed control is really good too. The power supply I'm using right now jumps in increments of 1 volt, so you don't really see the full extent of its smoothness, but that right there is operating at 1 volt. So that's got some really nice speed control. And also, this motor, for its size, has a lot of torque, so it won't have any problem at all moving this whole fairly heavy brass engine around with some cars behind it. I'm confident that it will hold up just fine for this model. So now I'm just gonna put up a little bit of wiring in here. So wire right brush to the right rail here, left brush to the truck. The owner of the model, he's intending to eventually install DCC and probably sound or even a battery controller or something in it from what he was describing. So that'll be interesting to see how that turns out. But yeah, I'll just do a simple DC wiring for now. And beyond that, the only thing left to do is just a little bit of filing within the boiler there so that it fits over the slightly expanded bracket right here. Because I did have to widen this a little bit to accommodate the 13mm motor. So I only have to file a small amount of material out of here, maybe about 0.5 millimeter on each side, millimeter at the most. So that'll barely be noticeable. Okay, modification on the body is done, and as expected, I didn't have to take much material out the sides. Most of what I had to do was right here, and even that was just kind of taking the Dremel inside of here, making a cut, and then just breaking the rest out, filing it down a little, and that gives it enough space for the motor. Now it is a tight fit, and you can see I have it wired here, just go to each end. But anyway, kind of a tight fit. You have to start it like this, kind of get it down on there, and then from there, pushes forward, and everything lines up just the way that it's supposed to. And there it is, all assembled. Got a couple wires connected to it just for quick testing. As for the motor, you can see, it extends a little bit into the cab, but definitely not much. Certainly not what the original motor did, where it was mounted completely inside the cab, and I think it extended back, or really just about filled the whole thing. One of those old open frame motors, I think. But yeah, anyway, that's a much lower profile. And as for the performance of the motor, I think it ended up being a really good option for this one. So that's running really nicely. I'm sure it'd be even nicer if it was on track. Of course, every time it turns around like that, it shorts out when the truck hits it, but anyway, I can at least do some quick tests to make sure everything is good, and I'd say that it is. And with that, I have done everything that I was asked to do for this model. It's got its new motor, it's running nicely, and I fixed a couple solder joints along the way, made some other slight modifications, so this should be all ready to go for the model's owner, and I will be sending this back to him as soon as I can.